series, of which I'm working on a couple right now. But most of the time, I just want to, I just write poetry. And what I'm going to do is, I haven't discussed this with Dominica, so it might throw a spanner in the works, but I'm going to let you guys choose the work that I share by typing in a word into the chat function. I think you can do so. And I'm going to look for a poem that contains your words, and then we're going to do it that way. Yeah, this is all on you. So please type a word into the chat function, and I'll see what I have. Yeah. Anyone?
So, desert flower mouth.
Okay, desert flower mouth. Okay, I'm gonna start with desert. Let's see. Yeah. Um, I have a sequence. I have a book length sequence of poems that just came out, and it's called The Actual Fuck. And it's a sequence of 55 poems, and one of them is called Fuck History. And history, and that poem contains the word desert. So this is that poem. For the early years I spent skimming the half desert, half battlefield in northern Nigeria, I wonder if the ground misses me. If in the fallow, shadowy holes I'd hide, giggling at my searching sisters, my toe prints are still held by the dust. What if my ancestors wear the dust? Which Fulani conquest spilled their blood? In which setting did they find romance? What if it is their meeting in me that spurs grains of sand to taste like sparks of clashing swords, like seeds of stars on moon nucleus? Sometimes I dream in Hausa and have no idea what is being said. Sometimes Arabic calligraphy looks to me like flowers on fire. What if the Quran is a forest of pressed flames? Is the call to prayer a line of low flames? What is it to miss a way of being I was too young to be? The largest possible quantity for anything is a lifetime. When my father returned from Hajj, doubting Islam, I was asleep. When the Imam's thugs aimed an AK at our car, I still believed until I stared down the barrel and saw no light at the tunnel's end. So began a lifetime of questions, each page a desert, each thin blue line a cold horizon. All the waiting words are shards of parched stars, the looming stanzas like rising moons, an infinite infidel hiding in me. Okay, another word, Dominica.
Nocturnal.
Nocturnal. Nocturnal. Oh no, I do not have, hold on. I don't think I've ever written a poem with that word. Nocturnal. Um, no, I haven't written, okay, now I have to write a poem with that word. No, I don't have a poem that contains the word nocturnal. Another word, please.
River.
River, okay. Yes. Let me see. Yeah, there are poems with the word river here. Let me see. Mm, yeah. Maybe I should read this one. Yeah. This is a poem called The Vanishing. And I don't know if you guys have been aware of some of the protests happening in Nigeria right now. And the protest, I think the hashtag is end SARS, and you can find out what's been happening. Is essentially against police brutality and police corruption in Nigeria. And this poem is something that happened to my auntie called Regina, and it's also touches on the corruption within the Nigerian Police Authority, who were actually the SARS, specifically the subset of the Nigerian police force. They were trained by the British police force, and that story has just broken today. So the links between power and colonialism are, they're still playing out across Nigeria right now. This is the poem. It's called The Vanishing. And it's about, it features three people that I knew. Isa, a friend of mine when I was a kid. Omo, who was the thief in question, the police officer, and Regina, who is my aunt, as I said. So this is the poem. It's called The Vanishing. Issa's story is that on an evening thick as a bat's soul, in a beer parlor overflowing like the river Niger itself, he heard it whispered that the thief who robbed the questionably rich, the legend who oiled the night's hinges, he who could vanish instantly, that nimble finger whose bracelet was beaded with human teeth, planned to strip some shipping merchant of his wealth, to drag his capitalist spirit back to the bone-crunching poverty that gripped the country. Issa's eyes widened like two oil spills, and he speed dialed his boss to double security. Omar's story is that the guards were unconscious before they hit the ground. He smeared his concoction of blood, brittle leaves, and beetle venom across the window bars, murmured the sacred incantations, and when they parted, slipped like savannah grass, breezed through like he had done 1,000 times before. His landing was soundless as cat's breath, his picking as clean as vultures, his ears keen as sin, until the wife screamed. He hadn't intended violence, but the brave merchant stood before her, gripping a knife which shook with the wild danger of inexperience, so he nullified the threat. Regina's story is that she waited days for her husband's eyelids to part, to catch the twinkle glint beneath his purpled flesh before she could leave him, cross the clogged expressway to the precinct to pour out breathlessly the scope of the crime. Only then did she query the surgeon's familiarity, his lithe and limber fingers, that odd bracelet glimmering down his cuff like a muffled voice, how her lungs shrunk, the corners of the office clenched like jaws, her stomach folded in on its empty self, and dropped what seemed 1,000 feet, and the ley lines of power that loop around the world grouped around her like a tightening noose. Thank you. Dominica, another word, please?
Enchanted.
Enchanted. Okay. Enchanted. Enchanted. I only have one poem with that word, and I like this poem. I don't read it that often. It's called Glass Xylophones and Vastness. I met a girl who met a guy who met a girl from South Dakota who likes the thin clash of teaspoon on glass. With varying sizes, she'd hazard a xylophone, and last Christmas played a medley so delicate, fairy lights blinked, enchanted by its rhythm. Imagine that, an entire constellation dancing to her prancing hands, pinkies poised like tuning forks. Perhaps this way came the world. A deity in darkness knocks together rocks. The aftershock and echo rocked clouds of matter, danced them human form, and we are still enchanted, lives blinking on. The guy who met that girl dives once a month. Down by the jetty where the sea spray stings, he dives. Not for the thick tide swooping over rocks, not for the soft rock lullaby of waves, not for the seagulls diving in brave past breakwater, not for the scrawling gale. He dives beneath the surface, arms out wide, and drifts to feel at one with the vastness of it all. The girl I met who met that guy is the crux of it all. You have to see her take the stage, her voice husky, small, have to see her chest fall, have to note her nape shudder, gotta hear her tongue flutter the folklore of his name. The audience hush like loosened waves, guitar strums rain. Flute feigns the scrawling gale, hi-hats like xylophones clash us through the vastness in which we dive, which we stage. We tap out the rhythm, rage and dance and age, till its enchantment tells our wage that each light one day blinks off. Thank you. I think we have time for maybe one or two more poems. Dominica, do you have another?
Yes. Fury.
Fury. Okay, Fury. Yeah. Okay, I have a few poems with it. The last poem of the book called The Actual and it's called Fuck You and it contains the word fury. So I'm gonna read that tonight. I think Julie was thinking of ordering a stack of the books for you guys to turn into contemporary dance. So this is a prequel into yeah, introduction to those poems. So this is the last poem in the book. It's called Fuck You. My love, I promised, should you ever say you're not a body that has a soul, but a soul that has a body, and that body is within the soul, I'd respond, fuck you, and fuck out of here with that new age shit. But I haven't because early this week, crawling between the crisp sheets for an afternoon nap, I fell back expecting a goose feather pillow to gather my loose neck, but instead kept falling as if the feathers had parted into the smoothest clouds, then just forming snow, then hard rain, then red mist, then fire, raging fire, then molten stone, oh boiling earth, oh liquid metal, oh solid thunder, all fire, all fury, through which I kept tumbling, through which I kept tumbling, and all went silent, as if I'd fallen off the cliff edge of quiet into space. All blue, all black, all blinking its many moons and million mysteries, all of them ministering to me, and amongst them was I, drifting at the slowest speed possible, yet far above, out and wide as the planet's girth, all expanding, all still, all me, still there in that bed, moon wrecked between its sheet, gasping and grasping at it. For the fleshy sparkle of the body's glow, for its muscular mystery, how could it contain all I had seen, all I had been, unless its reach is beyond itself, further than its bones allow, unless the soul is beyond its body, its edges blurring to brilliant madness. Cool, and I'll stop there. Thanks. I think I'm inviting Erik onto the screen right now, right? Okay, so I think you guys know who Erik is. I don't need to introduce him to you, but I only met him earlier this month. Yeah, hello.
Can we just go? Can we just start talking? Fabulous. In a way, you shed a lot of light heat, so you're perfect for this time of year. It's good having you in our company, and it's a remarkable company too. There are many names I recognize. It's a lovely group. Oh, boiling earth. Oh, boiling earth. You are good at what you do. You do a lot. And you do a lot of good. And the world is very busy right now. It's in a massive sort of pileup. I wonder if the times are driving you crazy or if it's what you need in your life. With the chaos of COVID and political discourse and ecologic cataclysm, does that fire you up? Or does that wear you out?
What is it? I think I oscillate from one extreme to another. I think a lot of the times I am fired up, but to write great poetry, to create great art, you need to be distant from what it is that is firing you up. You need to be able to look at it with clarity, with understanding, and with adequate time to pass, and with a sense of sort of a meditation of all its brittle bits. So I think it does fire me up, but I take a long time to respond to things. I just work quite a few things at the same time, so it feels as if I'm responding in real time to a lot of things. But no, I wrote a book which came out in the US earlier this month called The Half God of Rainfall, but I began working on it in 2009. So, and the play is about sexual harassment and toxic masculinity. And in the figure of Zeus, who's the villain in the story, you can find parallels with everyone from Bill Cosby to Harvey Weinstein, which made headlines only, a couple of years ago. But I've been working on this since 2009. So, but I think the story is as sharp as it is because I needed time to sharpen the story, which requires me to be plugged into the chaos, but not to lean front-footedly or headfirst into things, to require peace and meditation in order to create good art. Um, yeah, I think this year particularly has been tiresome, and it's particularly because I'm quite a tactile person. When I host a whole bunch of events to do with theater, to do with poetry, to do with music, besides my writing practice, I basketball also, and I get a lot of energy from my boys and from the people I collaborate with. But this year I've been alone, mostly in lockdown in my flat in London, which means that I can't siphon energy and strength and perseverance from those I collaborate with. It's just me going a little bit mad here. But other than that, I'm okay with trying to find a balance between knowing what's happening, but creating space to think deeply about it in order to create work.
The family
for you.
Lockdown sucks. It's demanding in terms of the small changes that it insists on. The way we teach and the way we rehearse, the way we're live with each other. But I think most dispiriting, or the most challenging invitation to hope, to put a positive spin on it, is that it seems to represent a kind of inevitability that this radical alienation and anger at the alien, manipulation of alienation, has been brewing for a long time. So as you suggest, you write something in 2009 and it comes true now, but that's because there was some sort of viral misery cooking, for that, since, at least since neoliberalism began, that is finding flower now. But yeah. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree with that.
How is your family? How is it being an artist with the family, and how is it being an artist with the family now?
Yeah, my closest family members, geographically at least, is my younger sister, her husband, and my niece. My parents live slightly further, about an hour away, and my twin sister, and my older sister lives with my parents, and my twin sister lives about 45 minutes away with her husband and her 4 kids. So most of the time, I think I digest some of their worries, their frustrations, the economic struggles they're going through, and I try to help them as much as I can, but the number of complications that they have pale in comparison to mine. There are multiple people in their households, their children who can't go to school, so the parents have to stay home and homeschool them and all of that. Whereas I live alone in my flat here. I'm single, so most of my frustrations come from my work, or my inability to produce work or to gather around. So I feel distance from the full horrors of the pandemic and the complications it can bring to an individual with a family. So I have a family, but I'm removed from the harsh realities of the pandemic. Yeah.
What are you doing? What are you doing these days? Like, there's the midnight run, which is a great idea. What are you doing to create a social sense or collectivity now? How
what I'm mostly doing is trying to organize some events online. I have one an hour after we're done tonight. but I have a huge network of artists and writers and poets and musicians and playwrights who are all going through similar things that I do, and most of the interaction happens digitally, unfortunately. The Midnight Run is a project that I was supposed to be running a few times in America this year. And for those who aren't aware of what the Midnight Run is, it's it's a 12-hour or 6-hour long exploration of a city from 6 p.m. to midnight or from 6 p.m. to 6 a.m., where I invite local artists to run interactions or workshops or interventions during the course of the Midnight Run, where we gather complete strangers to explore a city from dusk till dawn. And we just have really it's a containment for conversation to create more honest interactions with each other, and to explain who we are, why we are, and the things we believe in. And this year was supposed to be quite a busy year for the Midnight Run. We had events scheduled to take place in Ireland, in Italy, in Spain, a couple in America, and two or three here in London, and furthermore outside of the main city, the main capital. But everything has been knocked asunder because of the pandemic. So a lot of the Midnight Run facilitators who I trained are also very personable people. They all have to be good at gathering complete strangers and creating a uniting force. In fact, most of them are theater directors because that is the nature of the work of theater, to gather disparate voices under a shared vision. We just try to catch up with each other and dream of being able to hold midnight runs next year. Um, yeah, but my artistic practice still circles around the precision of language, around communication, and around gathering a body of people for short moments of time where we share and discuss and discover who we are.
I really share grounded with you in this idea of language and its beauty and its problem. Religious issues have informed the history of Nigeria. They inform the history of your own family. I wonder if does religion help give you some of the distance that you need as a poet, or is language your God?
Does religion give me some distance? I grew up in a multi-faith household. My father was a Muslim when he married my mother, who was a Christian, and because of the upheaval we faced in northern Nigeria, of which Boko Haram are the most well-known culprits, we had to flee Nigeria. We came to the UK, and I've lived here ever since. When we settled here, my father converted to Christianity, and whereas my sister has only ever followed my mother to church, I followed my father to the mosque and my mother to the church. So I was born into a plurality of belief, which my mother never experienced, neither did my sisters. But it meant that when I began to study religion in school, in secondary school, I was completely fascinated by how similar religions were, more so than how different they were. And this was around 1996, 1997. Then 4 years later, after the World Trade Center attacks happened, religious extremism, specifically from Islam, became global news, even though arguably it was the very narrative that I was born into. I feel as if because of that, I was better equipped than most people to discuss it, to look for the nuance, and to look through all the sort of right-wing and knee-jerk politics and reactionary stories that were dominating a lot of headlines. And and a sense of calm would settle when I would hear horrible things being said about Muslims, and even now about the horrible things being said about right-wing Christians who are dominating American politics, etc. Um, and I think that training gave me a peace of mind, always to kind of to lean back from things as opposed to lean forward and jump in knee jerk. But also because I grew up reading the King James Bible, I'm aware of the power of language and of words, and the beautification of language and what evils can be committed therein. Um, a lot of people who wrote the King James Bible worked on Shakespeare's plays. There's no way Shakespeare wrote a lot of those, by the way. And you can see the same patterns, and you can see similar patterns and syntax in the Bible as you can see in some of Shakespeare's work. And much as Shakespeare wrote beautifully, aspects of the Bible were written beautifully and used to also condemn and demonize members of the LGBT community. And that is still played out right across West African religious and church traditions, but also in various swathes of the world. So I think because I was hyper aware of that, I've always looked suspiciously at language. And I say so as a poet, right? Because I've always looked at where the kindling came from and who it was that was writing these stories that I was reading. English was used to colonize Nigeria. So it was a tongue that was forced down on myself and on my people. And arguably the same thing was done to various parts of the world that are English speaking, from many countries in the Middle East to, Singapore, many places in Asia, including India, Bangladesh, Pakistan, and the 88% of the world that the British colonized, including America. So each time I begin to write, I'm aware that I'm not using a language that is indigenous to myself, that there are fractions and roadblocks it has put between me and between understanding those who came before me, my ancestors. At the same time, it is the only language that I have, and there are blunt tools with which to try and declaim and understand myself, but it's all that I have. So I have this suspicious, reluctant, sort of Stockholm syndrome relationship with English and with writing specifically, but it's all that I do, and I can't really get away from it. Which is why trying to deconstruct language and trying to demystify the process of writing is very key to my practice as a writer. I run various workshops for various kind of people, and even the poetry that I create, I try to make sure it can be understood by anyone. I don't try to cloak or to bedazzle or to befuddle with poetry. They're poems, they're poets who create that kind of work, and sometimes I do enjoy that kind of work, but mostly I try to democratize language and poetry and the stories that I tell.
Mm-hmm. This word democracy is, I don't know if you have a poem called Fuck Democracy, but there's a lot to fuck in democracy. It's, as you use the word, as a complaint or as an invitation or a reproach. But about democracy and language, Africa boasts the continent of Africa boasts such a wealth, such a fertility of languages. And in Barbershop and in other writings, you celebrate the diversity of languages. And then there seems to be a pulse through your work that has a faith in unity, in some kind of global consciousness. And I'm wondering if you think diversity is at war with unity, or can they include each other? And how are things looking in terms of the language wars?
I think I don't think diversity is a word with unity. I think the attempt to homogenize everything is what the problem is what the root cause of the various problems we're having. I went to one of the most racially diverse schools in the UK when I arrived here from Nigeria. Back in Nigeria, most of the kids were just dark-skinned Nigerian kids. 99% of those in my classroom kind of looked like me. But when I came to Holland Park, the school was so diverse that Nelson Mandela came to visit when he was alive, and he saw a harmony in the racial diversity that he was trying to recreate in his South Africa, which arguably he failed at doing. But in my class, there were kids there from India, from Bangladesh, from Pakistan, from China, from Japan, from South Korea, from Singapore, from Egypt, Iran, all from the Caribbean islands, all in my single classroom. And we never tried to be the same, and our teachers never tried to make us think the same. They just tried to let us celebrate our identities and just do the homeworks. And there were lots of squabbles and battles and fights in the playgrounds because we were all strenuously ourselves. I think the Moroccan kids were the largest block, so it was us against the Moroccans. But we also loved the Moroccans. The first girl I fell in love with was a Moroccan girl. So there were lots of ways in which we played up to our identity and struggled to define it against each other. But we really celebrated ourselves, you know. But what has happened subsequently is the school was privatized and all these kids were forced to wear school uniforms, whereas when I was going, we all wore our clothes, which means that there's something to do with capitalism and neoliberalism, which enforces a certain sort of brand of unity, which strips identity out of the equation, and that's the problem. That's the problem. So I don't think there's a friction. There's a natural tension between unity and diversity. It's just how you let the humanity, what is humane, come to fruition, and not try and straitjacket it as I think that's the problem.
Mm-hmm. Do you so much of the actual, which everyone should get a copy of? It's a fantastic work. A lot of it, as I understand it, was written with your thumbs or written on a phone.
Yeah.
In between things, and I think you've called your laptop home, or yeah. So you're not one of those people who thinks that digitality is flattening language or destroying the world. You're able to make it work for you.
I don't think digitality is destroying the world. I think social media is, and they're not the same thing. Yeah, I think being able to use and communicate digitally saves so much money for people from disparate communities. I can communicate with friends I have in Nigeria. I have a taxi driver I always use when I work in Nigeria, and we just chat through WhatsApp. And he's a working class Nigerian, and sometimes I'm able to send money when he's in dire need at the drop of a hat. It takes like 20 minutes and doesn't have to starve or worry about food or his rent. And because of the differences in currency, a little bit of money for me means a lot to him. So those are some of the benefits of digitization of our world. But social media and the way in which it's been colonized by capitalism is the problem here, and how it's creating shorter and shorter attention spans. We become dependent on dopamine, which we get from all of those things. That's the problem. But the digitization of our world isn't an issue. It's brought so many beautiful things. I mean, we're able to do this right now, and if it doesn't exist, the alternative would be that I'd have flown over to New Mexico, which has its brilliance, but then we're contributing to climate change and there are all of those issues. I know, for instance, that some of the literature festivals that I've been invited to, they have to take into consideration the cost of flying me over there, and it's thousands and thousands of pounds. And because of that, sometimes other writers might not be afforded those same privileges or those same spaces that I'm able to work in. But because of things like this now, I can just zoom into festivals, and then maybe I can bring a friend of mine, and they can split the amount of money they were paid that had spent on that plane ticket with my colleagues. So this does free up and include more people, I think. But trying to reduce our dependency and the illusion of community which social media proffers, I think we put the world in a better stead. Politically, socially, personally, in terms of mental health. The benefits are numerous, I think.
Yeah. Soon, I think we'll want to open up to questions, but reflecting on what you've just said, that the digital space is live. We're live right now, but it's the life of a virus, and there's the idea of going viral, that the digital or social media may be best as a kind of infection. So if your being here with us now causes a kind of ill yearning or to have you here live, then it's a great thing.
Yeah.
If we become lovesick for you and have to bring you over here, then that's a good thing. So the digital as a potential useful disease is maybe where it's at, and then it's a yucky disease.
I remember early in the pandemic, when all the conspiracy theories were running rife and none of them were unfounded. There was idea that the coronavirus might be transmutable through computer screens and through the
Yes.
Wi-Fi. And I think I had a mild heart attack when I read that, because the idea of not being able to switch on my ready to read an email because I might get corona from it really freaked me out. But I'm glad that was just bullshit. Yeah.
I don't know. You know, it's we'll see. 10 years from now, we'll see what's up. I have just one last question, and then Julie and Dominique, if we have other questions, maybe we should open it up. But 2 basketballs on your bookshelf in the background, and I wonder if you still play point guard, or if how basketball still features in your life.
Yeah, I'm no longer playing guard. The guys I play with are all better than me. So I think what I spend most of the time doing is standing around waiting for someone to pass me the ball. And then when I get the ball, I try to get rid of it as soon as possible so I don't make a mistake. And then I run interference, really. I try and guard as much as I can and screen for my teammates and try and make sure that they're free enough to take the proper shots. That's what I do. I have a sweet spot, which 50% of the time, right from the top of the key, I can shoot 3 points, and 50% of the time they go in, and I'm just on fire. But most of the time, I just run interference and try and make sure the other guys are free. We've only played 5 sessions of basketball. About 7 sessions of basketball this entire year because of the pandemic. And we just got back in the swing of things before lockdown was announced. A version of lockdown about 3 weeks ago, and I haven't played since. There was a moment of catharsis when we were all watching The Last Dance on Netflix, where we began trash talking each other again after watching a glorious documentary on Michael Jordan's and the Bulls from to the 1998 championships. But yeah, I haven't played since properly.
There's a lot to open up there in terms of what I've long thought that the NBA was a cultural bellwether, and in terms of its global mentality, and now in terms of its activism. But maybe that's a conversation for when you get out here.
Yeah.
Questions, Dominica? Do you want to field something or?
Yeah, we've got a queue over here. So if we can't get to everyone's questions, of course we apologize. We want to be respectful of everyone's time. And one of the questions was about the basketballs on your shelf. So thanks for diving into that. So I've got kind of a multifaceted question here. There's sort of many questions in one about Barbershop Chronicles, and then a little bit about your process. And Dominique and I were lucky enough to be able to see the production in Oxford a year ago. And I tell everyone all the time, it's in my top 5 favorite plays I've ever seen in my life. I loved it so very much. So for those of you that don't know, Barbershop Chronicles is a full-length play of Inua. So the question is about your process, the fact that you were able to go to different barbershops around Africa and in the UK and interview people and such. And so this student is wondering, or human, sorry, is wondering, have you done that with other work? Have you done that with your poetry, interviewing and sort of pulling those stories? And then also curious about how important do you feel like it is for playwrights and poets to be good listeners?
Yeah. And
how do we become better listeners? So nice, simple question right at the top.
Yeah. Yes, I have done that a few times. Actually, in most of my plays, I research and I try and interview and travel. When I first started writing, I couldn't do so because of my immigration history. I only got the right to live and work in the UK in 2011, and I've been writing for, 8 years by that time. And a lot of my plays I would just try to research and watch as much films, documentaries as I can about the locations in which the plays happen. But as soon as I was able to, as I was able to travel, I traveled everywhere. I think I used my entire passport within 1 year. I just went everywhere that I could, and for Barbershop Chronicles, traveling to all of those countries was really, really important because of a number of reasons. The first is, as much as I'm aware of how wild an imagination that I have, it has its limits, and in order to really embody other people and to write honestly from their worlds, from their point of views, I have to go out to meet them. And it isn't a privilege that is afforded to many writers for financial or whatever reasons, but I could do so, and definitely the play would not be what it is if I hadn't traveled across the continent and met all of those men. For Three Sisters, that required a lot of research, and I met a few Biafran. So Three Sisters, an adaptation of the play by Chekhov. Mine was set during the Nigerian Civil War, the Biafran War. And to write that, I read a whole lot of novels as I could, documentaries I could find, but I got to interview some Biafran War descendants and refugees, some of which live here in the UK as well. So they were able to just add a lot of color and texture to the stories that I was trying to tell and fit within Chekhov's glorious structure. For The Half-God of Rainfall, that was a really difficult play to write, book to write, because it's about sexual violence. And in order to write that, I needed to interview friends of mine, women who had been victims of sexual harassment or sexual abuse, and which was the most delicate set of conversations and interviews that I had. And I had to start with my sisters, who and listen to them tell me about things that happened with them, ways in which men had addressed them. Some men that I knew was really difficult because then I had to have a conversation with those men afterwards. But also speaking with really dear friends of mine and ex-lovers of mine telling me difficult stories was humbling to hear as a man. And then I realized the full extent of my male privilege in being in the spaces that I could wander in without having to think twice about anything, and how much women carry. And I needed to do that in order to write the story that I wrote. So as much as possible, I think interviewing is important, is visceral. Otherwise, at best, you're delivering something that is surface level, where the depths is really important to any truth or clarity or meaning or lasting impact. I think I've forgotten the other two parts of the question, Julie.
So curious about listening as artists.
Yeah. Listening, like I said, is viscerally important. And how to listen is to be completely aware of your privilege, of how limited your worldview is, and understanding of how the world operates. And it's a really difficult thing because we sense and perceive the world through our eyes, through our five senses, and they're particular to us, and it's all we know. And to be told or to have to confront the fact that at best, how you understand the world is deeply flawed, is fundamentally flawed, is quite a difficult thing to communicate. When I was a kid, I was reading Bertrand Russell's Introductions to the Problems of Philosophy. I was like 14. I was reading books that I had no business reading, but that was one of the profound things that really changed my understanding of how I understood the world. And he gives this little description of how if you walk into a room and stand in one particular position and look at a table, that view of the table only exists because you're there to witness it. So it is entirely from your point of view, and it's only there because you are there. But also because of how the eyes take in light, the color of brown you're seeing differs slightly from the next person because the construction and the constitution of their eyes and their conical vision is different from yours. So your brown is different from their brown. Your green is different from their green. Your yellow is different from their yellow. And this is how it is the world over. However we see things is vastly different from others. And the only way to tell a singular truth is to tell the same story from everyone's point of view. And in order to tell the truth about the world is to write about it and include 7 billion other points of view. And that is impossible. So I take that same humility to writing and to listening, to the complete awareness, with the complete awareness that at best I have a fraction of the truth. And in order to write anything that's clearer or bigger, I need to really walk in other people's shoes and take on board their opinions. And I think about this with regards to how fractured and messed up the politics is here in the UK, across Europe, and also in the States and the Americas. We have an intensely right-wing and conservative government. And after, there's a new election and it just gained more seats, I begin to think maybe I'm the wrong one here. I believe in collaboration, I believe in imagination, I believe in liberalism, but half of England don't. And we can't, I can't think they're mad, because by the same token, they would think I'm mad, and they're within their rights to think as much as I am, and we have to try and meet in the middle somehow. And I take that as the same approach to just writing and to listening, to understanding that I don't have all the cards and I'm probably 50% likely to be wrong on the things that I believe.
That's really lovely. Thank you for sharing that. I'm going to try and smash some questions together since we're getting close to time. So you had mentioned that you write on your phone.
Yeah.
So curious about if that is your main mode of writing. Do you write with, how do you write, like physically? Also, how did you start? Did you start with poetry? Did you start with plays? Did you start with what sort of did you start with? And then I think the last thing is why theater? Why did you eventually get into theater, or was that a start? So sorry, again, smashing a couple together.
I'll try and give shorter answers. I talk a little bit too much. So I wrote the actual on my phone because when I was working on it, I didn't think it was going to be a book. It was just me angry at the world and tried to contain and find some catharsis in writing my anger. So I wrote it between meetings, when I was off and on the trains and in taxis, etc. Because for me, it wasn't work; it was just exploration, and yeah. But I write using all the ways that are afforded to me. I sometimes type directly onto my iPad. I use my Apple Pencil on the various note-taking apps that exist. I also have several notebooks at any one time, always with me in my back pocket. I write sometimes directly onto my laptop as well. So various ways, shapes, and forms, depending on what it is I'm writing, how it is I'm writing, and the spaces that I am in. The next question was, Julie?
What did you start with? Poetry, plays?
I started with poetry specifically because poetry is one of the simplest art forms to get into. You just need words and a sense of aesthetics and how to carve those words together. And I began, just words and pencil and paper. But even those are arbitrary. You don't need those. You could just hold the verses in your head. So poetry was the simplest way to start my artistic practice and expression, and it started that way. And I moved to theater because things got a little bit too chaotic. I was invited to this huge music festival called Glastonbury here in the UK, and I was invited there to read poetry. And I was reading and performing in this tent, and it was one of the worst Glastonburys ever on record, where there was downpours and rains and thunderstorm from the very first day. And the tent was shaking in this tornado, in this wind. And there was a guy who had been slithering in the mud outside the toilets, and was completely butt naked. And he kept on running in and launching himself at my audiences who were drunk or high or drunk and high. and there were 12-year-old girls in the tent trying to sell them skunk and magic mushrooms, and the audiences were, there were, everything that could happen was happening in that tent. And there I was begging for peace and for quiet so I could read them poetry. So because of that, I ran into theaters, because you can control everything in a theater space. And audiences come expecting just to sit down and to be listened and to give themselves to whatever it is happening on stage, be it a lone voice speaking or drama. So that's how I ended up working in theater. Because of the illusion of control.
Yeah, I like that. You were like, where can I go that there's like focus and quiet? The theater, which is like the opposite sometimes of how, I feel like it. But I've been at those festivals. I feel you. Well, again, just really want to be respectful of time, and we really only have 2 more minutes. So thank you, everyone, for your questions. There's some really, really lovely ones in here. And thank you so much, Inua. I'm going to turn it back over to Dominika, I think. And it's just been so lovely having you here, even for this short time.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Thanks.
Well, I just like to thank both Inua Ellams and Erik for their time today. This was a fantastic conversation, and hopefully we will be able to bring Inua's work out to New Mexico, within the next year, actually. So hopefully that will work out. Thank you, everyone, for coming. This was a fantastic event, so I'm glad you were able to share within it. Thank you all for coming, and have a wonderful weekend.
Thank you. Thanks, Dominika.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.